Following the end of World War I, a new political doctrine emerged in Italy and Germany and was strongly enforced and spread by two extremely influential figures, Benito Mussolini and Adolf Hitler. This new political ideology was named Fascism by Mussolini, an Italian dictator and journalist who founded and led the National Fascist Party. Mussolini started his political life as a socialist and in 1912 was appointed editor of Avanti, a leading socialist newspaper. During the Great War, Mussolini was expelled from the Socialist Party for advocating Italy's entrance into battle, and he organized the Fascist Party immediately following the war. By exploiting general fears of labor unrest and communism, Mussolini gained his followers among war veterans and the middle class. Mussolini organized his march on Rome in 1922 in order to bring down the government, and King Victor Emmanuel, fearful of a civil war, appointed Mussolini prime minister. This book, The Doctrine of Fascism, is an essay attributed to Mussolini. In truth, the first part of the essay, entitled Fundamental Ideas, was written by the Italian philosopher Giovanni Gentile, while only the second part, Italian for Political and Social Doctrine, is the work of Mussolini himself. In 1940, Mussolini ordered all remaining copies of the document, which had different editions and translations, to be retracted because it changed his mind about certain points. Anyway, Mussolini begins this book by saying, like all sound political conceptions, fascism is action and it is thought. Action in which doctrine is immanent, and doctrine arising from a given system of historical forces in which it is inserted and working on them from within. It has therefore a form correlated to contingencies of time and space, but it has also an ideal content which makes it an expression of truth in the higher region of the history of thought. There is no way of exercising a spiritual influence in the world as a human will dominating the will of others, unless one has a conception both of the transient and the specific reality on which that action is to be exercised, and of the permanent and universal reality in which the transient dwells and has its being. To know men, one must know man, and to know man, one must be acquainted with reality and its laws. There can be no conception of the state which is not fundamentally a conception of life. Philosophy or intuition, system of ideas evolving within the framework of logic or concentrated in a vision or a faith, but always, at least potentially, an organic conception of the world. He says that fascism has a spiritual attitude towards life, proposing individual self-sacrifice and the renunciation of self-interest in the name of discipline and duty. He says, thus many of the practical expressions of fascism, such as party organization, system of education and discipline, can only be understood when considered in relation to its general attitude toward life, a spiritual attitude. Fascism sees in the world not only those superficial, material aspects in which man appears as an individual, standing by himself, self-centered, subject to natural law, which instinctively urges him toward a life of selfish momentary pleasure. It sees not only the individual but the nation and the country, individuals and generations bound together by a moral law, with common traditions and a mission which, suppressing the instinct for life closed in a brief circle of pleasure, builds up a higher life, founded on duty, a life free from the limitations of time and space, in which the individual, by self-sacrifice, the renunciation of self-interest, by death itself, can achieve that purely spiritual existence in which his value as a man consists. The conception is therefore a spiritual one, arising from the general reaction of the century against the materialistic positivism of the 19th century. Anti-positivistic but positive, neither skeptical nor agnostic, neither pessimistic nor supinely optimistic, as are, generally speaking, the doctrines which place the center of life outside man, whereas, by the exercise of his free will, man can and must create his own world. Fascism wants man to be active and to engage in action with all his energies. It wants him to be manfully aware of the difficulties besetting him and ready to face them. It conceives of life as a struggle in which it behooves a man to win for himself a really worthy place, first of all by fitting himself physically, morally, and intellectually to become the implement required for winning it. As for the individual, so for the nation, and so for mankind. Hence the high value of culture in all its forms, and the outstanding importance of education. Hence all the essential value of work by which man subjugates nature and creates a human world. Mussolini says that this positive conception of life is obviously an ethical one. It invests the whole field of reality as well as the human activities which master it. No action is exempt from moral judgment. No activity can be despoiled of the value which a moral purpose confers on all things. Therefore, life, as conceived of by the fascist, is serious, austere, and religious. All its manifestations are poised in a world that is sustained by moral forces and subject to spiritual responsibilities. The fascist, therefore, disdains an easy life. The fascist conception of life is a religious one in which man is viewed in his immanent relation to a higher law, endowed with an objective will transcending the individual and raising him to conscious membership of a spiritual society. Anti individualistic, the fascist conception of life stresses the importance of the state and accepts the individual only insofar as his interests coincide with those of the state, which stands for the conscience and the universal will of man as a historic entity. It is opposed to classic liberalism, which arose as a reaction to absolutism and exhausted its historical function when the state became the expression of the conscience and will of the people. Liberalism denied the state in the name of the individual. Fascism reasserts. The fascist conception of the state is all embracing. Outside of it, no human or spiritual values can exist, much less have value. Thus understood, fascism is totalitarian, and the fascist state, a synthesis and a unit conclusive of all values, interprets, develops, and potentates the whole life of a people. He says that it is progressive and that under it the state is power which fulfills its will. He says, a nation as expressed in the state is a living ethical entity only insofar as it is progressive. Inactivity is death. Therefore, the state is not only authority which governs and confers legal form and spiritual value on individual wills, but it is also power which makes its will felt and respected beyond its own frontiers, thus affording practical proof of the universal character of the decisions necessary to ensure its development. He also says that all doctrines which postulate peace are incompatible with fascism. Fascism does not, generally speaking, believe in the possibility or utility of perpetual peace. It therefore discards pacifism as a cloak for cowardly renunciation in contradistinction to self-sacrifice. War alone keys up all human energies to their maximum tension and sets the seal of nobility on those peoples who have the courage to face it. All other tests are substitutes which never place a man face to face with himself before the alternative of life or death. Mussolini first outlines fascism's fundamental ideas by noting the main difference between fascism and the political ideologies of liberalism, socialism, and democracy. He criticizes materialistic values and views. He thought it was an insult to society to care more about intangible things and stated that inequalities are a part of the nature of society. He notes the difference with socialism and says that well-being cannot be achieved automatically by assuring maximum material comfort. And he then notes the differences with democracy and says that democracy is a lie which makes the people believe that they exercise sovereignty while being ruled by secret forces. And its problem is that it equates a nation to the majority. He then says that fascism combines the positive elements of liberalism, socialism, and democracy. In these words, from beneath the ruins of liberal, socialist, and democratic doctrines, fascism extracts those elements which are still vital. It preserves what may be described as the acquired facts of history. It rejects all else. He then says that the fascist state is imperialistic in nature. He says the fascist state expresses the will to exercise power and to command. Here, the Roman tradition is embodied in a conception of strength. Imperial power, as understood by the fascist doctrine, is not only territorial or military or commercial, it is also spiritual and ethical. An imperial nation, that is to say, a nation of which directly or indirectly is a leader of others, can exist without the need of conquering a single square of mile of territory. Fascism sees in the imperialistic spirit a manifestation of their vitality. In the opposite tendency, which would limit their interests to the home country, it sees a symptom of decadence. Peoples who rise or re-arise are imperialistic. Renunciation is characteristic of dying peoples. The fascist doctrine is that best suited to the tendencies and feelings of a people which, like the Italian, are after lying fallow during centuries of foreign servitude, are now reasserting itself in the world.